welcome along to Beyond at Home. We're so glad that you're tuning in, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on YouTube, or whether you're watching later on demand. And hey, let's be honest, it is so difficult to think, hey, where can I make a difference in the world and where do I even begin? Well, in this episode of Beyond at Home, Reilly is going to tell us where you can make a difference in your local community that will have a massive, massive impact this year as we continue our annual generosity campaign called Be Rich. But before we get there, my name's Chris, and we want to let you know that here at Beyond, we want to create a church that people who have no church experience would love to engage with. So if you stick around after this episode, I'm going to show you a couple of ways that you can begin to engage. But until then, I'll leave it to Reilly to take it away.
Well, in this episode of Beyond at Home, we're in week 2 of one of our annual campaigns that we call Be Rich. It's the time of the year where we do collectively what we do individually each year, and we're so excited to be able to celebrate Be Rich this year. We take the campaign slogan of Be Rich from something a guy named Paul said. He wrote this in 1 Timothy 6 verse 17 to 18, "Command those who are rich in the present world," that's us, to do good and to be rich. That's our big phrase for our Be Rich campaign this year, and in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. So last week we focused on a financial generosity to support our local community. We put the challenge out to you to put $39.95 towards the Be Rich campaign so we can inspire and encourage and support our local community. The awesome thing about this year for Be Rich 2020 is that we are doing this collectively with over 68 churches, 6 countries, and get this 113,000 people together. 113,000 people together are looking to support and encourage their local community. We're going to be a part of something big this year, a big movement in the Be Rich campaign. And in this episode, we're going to explore how we can make a big difference in our local community together. And in today's episode, we're going to look at how we can be rich in good deeds and serve our local community in a most practical way. Because to do that, we're really wrestling with this statement that everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. That everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. And I completely understand that if you've ever had an experience with a Christian before that's left a sour taste in your mouth, or where that's just been modeled to you, the idea that everybody matters to God is just modeled to you and shown to you in a really poor way, then I completely understand why you might push back against the Christian faith. You see that the hallmark of the church, the hallmark of the Christian church is meant to be that of people loving people. Because if there was a God who did in fact make people, then surely those people matter to that God in some ways. See, everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. The crazy thing is, in the ancient times, this principle never kind of existed. In the ancient world, everyone kind of had multiple gods. This polytheistic faith was really popular. Polytheism, where people had multiple gods, was really popular, and it was part of the culture. So the idea that there could be a God that actually cared for people just seems so bizarre. See, in the ancient times, people weren't treated like they mattered. In fact, in the ancient times, when Jesus entered the world, Jesus actually entered into a world where people were seen as property before they were seen as people. This was really explicit in the Jewish kind of culture and faith, where they actually believed in one God. They were a monotheistic faith. And even for the Jews, it was really difficult for them to even wrap their mind around the fact that there could be one single God who possibly cared for them. This was a culture where slavery was just assumed. Everyone had the possibility of becoming a slave. You only had to leave your town and then come back to find out it was invaded to become a slave. You only had to get injured one day whilst you were working to become a slave. You only had to be in debt to become a slave. Everyone had the possibility of being somebody else's property. So within these ancient times, within this time and within this culture, the idea of human life was just simply devalued. And what this means is that the whole idea of treating people with dignity or with value, or the idea of treating people equally, just didn't exist in this time. And if you showed compassion, if you showed humility, if you reached out to support someone, even your next door neighbor, that was considered a weakness within this time. And the crazy thing is that when we actually look at the person of Jesus, who entered into this part of history when people were seen as property, that how he actually went beyond barriers, how he had conversations with people, how he reached out and showed compassion and showed humility to others, how he was distinctly Christ-like, that this sort of compassion and this way of reaching out is actually distinctly Christ-like. In fact, it is distinctly Christian message. And I understand that some of you might really push back against that, or that might leave a sour taste in your mouth because you're like, oh, I just haven't received that before from a Christian, and I just push back against it. But this is a uniquely Christian message, this idea of actually being for people, that every person matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. And this is the brand new idea that Jesus then brought to the world. There's a whole new way of kind of living, but also seeing people, this responsibility of leaning into saying to people around us and saying to the world that you are valuable. You are valuable, you are valuable, you are valuable to God, and you're valuable to me because you're valuable to God. This is his brand new idea. And just to highlight how challenging this idea of doing good for others is, even in our culture today, I wanted to look at one of Jesus's most famous ever messages, one of his most famous ever delivered sermons, and really kind of how he draws this tension out in us, how Jesus draws this tension out in us. And in fact, this is what Jesus says. He says, "Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." To which we immediately are kind of like, but wait, like what if they don't kind of reciprocate what we're giving? Like, what if they manipulate us? What if they take advantage of our generosity? Which Jesus actually says, like, perfect. Like, actually, that's perfect. And it's crazy. He says that later on, a couple of sentences later on in his message. He actually says, that's perfect. That's perfect. Like, if you were loan to them and they don't pay you back, Jesus is like, perfect. But that's not perfect to us. Like, it's so clear that's a problem. But Jesus is like, no, this is really trying to tease out these values of what he calls these kingdom values that are game changers for people when it comes to experiencing the life designed for you, designed for me. He's saying you need to understand what I've done for you. That's absolutely perfect. So Jesus says, right, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, now when he said, but I tell you, here's what he was saying. He was saying, everybody that's told you that is wrong. Like, that has never, your heavenly Father, God, creator of the universe, has never commanded you to hate. And again, this is where the church so very often gets this wrong. See Jesus say, I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And if we just pause there, because he just said to pray for the people who persecute us. Like who would do that? Or right? Like, I mean, who would do that? Who would love your enemies and then pray for those who persecute you? Like, even as a Christian, rarely might you ever find yourself praying for people outside of your immediate kind of family, outside of your friendship circle. But even if you like chuck up the lone message to God, like that quick prayer, how often would you spend that time praying for your enemy, praying for someone that you dislike, or even someone that you'd say that you hate? Like Jesus is saying here, it's this brand new idea. When you pray, I want you to think about the person that is persecuting you at work, the person who is giving you grief in your life right now, even that person in your family who's just causing havoc. I want you to think about that person that just gets you on your last nerve, and I want you to pray for them. First time I heard this, it kind of sounds like, right, I'll pray, I'll do the good stuff, I'll do the nice stuff, and then God, like, you'll sort them out, right? Like, you'll fix it. And Jesus here is like, he's like, no, that's not how this is working. He says, pray for your enemies, because as you begin to pray every single night for that person that persecutes you, and whatever that persecution looks like for you, whoever that person might be or people might be, if you pray for that person every night, your attitude begins to change. And you know who your attitude will begin to mirror? Your attitude will begin to mirror your Heavenly Father. And if you want to get to the place you need to be, if you want to be healthy, if you want to be the kind of person who can just drive out all those internal struggles or those internal demons that are just holding on to you, if you want to be the person that you are designed to be, then you need to pray for the person that persecutes you until you see him or her and feel towards him or her in the way that your Heavenly Father feels towards that person. And then Jesus gets really practical. He gives us the purpose or the result of this. And this is kind of the real zinger moment. He says this to the audience in front of me. He says, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children like your Father in heaven. It's not about never making a mistake. It's not about never sinning, though we should really weigh that up and we should consider that. But what I'm really saying here is this is exactly what the religious leaders, these religious thinkers, were so caught up on in Jesus' time. Never sinning, never making a mistake, living by the rule book. And that's what they did, and that's what they tried for. That was their mark of perfection. But you see, this definition, this perspective of perfection that Jesus brought is amazing. Because he said that perfection is doing good for those who cannot or will not do good for you. Jesus' kind of definition of perfection here, if we were summarizing it, is to do good for people who cannot or will not do good for you. I don't know about you, but I just think that's a way more challenging thing than following a set of rules. That's way more challenging than never letting a bad word come out of your mouth or a bad thought enter your mind. That's way more challenging than telling somebody else that their beliefs are wrong and that your beliefs are right. Jesus' perspective and definition of perfection is to do good for people who cannot or will not do good for you. He's saying that's exactly the standard. This is exactly the standard that Jesus set, and that's exactly the standard that Jesus calls his followers to. Now, I know it might be a challenging thought for us at times to think about doing good for people that we know won't actually do good for us in return. That idea of just giving something away and knowing we're not getting anything back. But at the same time, maybe for you to even initiate help in the first place, it would actually take seeing someone or knowing that someone's in an extreme situation. So I want to set the bar kind of really low for us in today's episode. And I want to focus on doing good for people who cannot do good for us. People because of their life circumstances, because of their financial situation, because of the season that's been, or family struggles, just because of their circumstances being out of their control. This is a moment in time. This is a moment in time where we can do good for you. And for us, the easiest way that we can think of doing this together, collectively, what we can do individually throughout the scope of a year right now is through our Be Rich campaign, that we can do good for people in our local community who cannot do good for us by partnering with local non-for-profits and know that we're making a difference in our community by serving our community in a really practical way. Well, we've got a number of ways that you can serve within our community and throughout this Be Rich campaign and be a part of this big movement. Practical ways where you can serve within your Connect group, or if you're not in a Connect group yet and would like to be, then you can sign up online at Beyond Church AU. But at the same time, even just volunteer your time to actually serve the local community in this season that's ahead. A really practical way that you can do that is actually by just volunteering yourself. And one of the really big local community services that we really want to honor and celebrate this week is the Brisbane and Moreton Bay Foster and Kinship Services. These guys are for our community in a most practical way. They have over 108 families who provide care to young people, with over 150 young people in their care. And this year, they're looking at putting together 108 hampers so these families can celebrate Christmas after what's been an incredibly challenging 2020. So we want to serve them in a most practical way. And we want to invite you to partner with the Brisbane and Moreton Bay Foster and Kinship Services and partner in this Be Rich campaign to create something awesome. So we are going to look at help packing together hampers so we can blast that 108 hampers total just off the charts and deliver these hampers to families for this Christmas. So here's a really practical next step for you. All you need to do is jump onto the Beyond Church website. It's just www.beyondchurch.com.au. You'll see a Be Rich tab on the website. All you need to do next, and we'd love to invite you to do, is just fill out your details there and how you'd like to serve throughout this Be Rich campaign, because again, we're a part of something really amazing this year. 68 churches over 6 countries with 113,000 people. And maybe even right now, there's still a little bit of resistance and you think that, like, I wish I could, but I just don't have the time. Or maybe there's another challenge in play, like work in the Christmas season, or there's just family stuff going on and there's just a whole bunch of things happening right now for you. Okay, I totally understand that. But I guess the big challenge that we want to put out in this Be Rich movement too is, what would it look like for you to serve? What would it look like for you to serve the people around you and show people that everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not? Don't you want to be part of a world where people don't need to be asked to do good deeds, where people actually just proactively see a need in another person and they respond to it in a really practical and really simple way? Because isn't this a world that you want for yourself, a world that you want for your children, for your family? What if we didn't just have to hope for it anymore, but we actually started taking the steps towards modeling this in our local community and letting it reach outwards? What would it look like to be part of a movement this year for you, alongside of 113,000 other people who are seeking to change the world? Because we're not going to wait for the world to change. We're going to be part of changing the world in this season ahead. If you're a follower of Jesus, let me remind you that Jesus was famous in his day, for how he treated people. And then he says to you and to me to follow me, to follow me. That was his words. So let's follow together by serving our local community this year in a really simple and a really practical and fun way.
Well, thanks so much for sticking around after the episode. You can actually find the links to be a part of Be Rich down in the comments section below or in the description on YouTube. We'd love to help you make a difference in your local community. But hey, at the start of the episode, I said stick around and I'd show you some ways to engage. There's 2 really simple ways that you can begin to engage if you liked what you heard Reilly talking about in this episode. The first way is to tune into our Beyond the Message podcast that comes out every Wednesday, where you'll hear Lockie actually have a conversation with Reilly about some of the things that he spoke about. If you just search Beyond Church AU on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts, you'll be able to tune in to that episode's past. All our other past episodes are up there as well. The second way you can engage if you want to is you can actually join us in person, because Beyond is back in person at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. at 19 Wesley Road, Griffin. So we would love to meet you in person. But if that's not your jam, we will see you next weekend for another episode of Beyond at Home. Have a great week.